Hey guys, it's Bart Johnson here. Now, as a professional cinematographer, I've worked with all sorts of cameras, ranging from DSLRs to red cinema cameras, and all the way down to some of the more fun cameras that I've worked with, which are the GoPros. I do a lot of stuff recreationally with the GoPros. I love flying them on my DJI Phantom, and I like just sticking them in all sorts of places that other cameras can't go. But a lot of people have been asking me, once you've shot with the GoPro, how do I get my footage to look the way it finally does when I posted my YouTube videos? So today I want to give you a little tutorial of some of the post-production that I do and how I work with the footage coming out of my GoPro cameras. So in order to make life easier for us when we get into post-production, we want to make sure we get our camera set up in the first place the way we want it to make everything easier. So here's a GoPro Hero 4. And we want to get started by going into the camera video settings. Here's our video settings here. Our mode is currently set to video, and we have some other options here. Here's our resolutions. We have 4K, 4K Super View, 2.7K, Super View of that, 4:3, 1440, 1080 Super View, 1080, 960, 720 Super View, 720 regular, and WVGA. And we're back to 4K. I like to shoot in 4K. Next we have our frames per second. In 4K we have 24 and 30. I like to shoot in 24. Here we have our field of view. Our only option is wide. And we can go through. Here we go, Pro Tune. I like to leave my Pro Tune on and set my white balance. Go through the options. I set my white balance to native, which is the flattest look you can get. Color settings, you can choose GoPro color or flat. I choose flat. ISO limit, you have several choices here to limit how high the ISO go. I like to keep it at 400. Keep sharpness, set it to high. EV compensation at 0, and there we go. Those are all of our settings. If you want to do some video in slow motion, you have to change the setting on the resolution down to 1080. So I set it to 1080, and our frames per second choices range from 24 all the way up to 120. You can also shoot in 90 frames per second or 60, and I prefer to shoot at 60 for smooth aerials. And field of view, we have more options in 1080, but I still like to keep it in wide. As we go through everything else, same Pro Tune settings, native, flat, ISO 400, sharpness on high, and that should get us all set for shooting. So now that you've gone out and shot some footage with your GoPro, you're going to want to get it home and take the card out and plug it into your computer. So what we've got here is our GoPro card. GoPro likes to call them no name. Go under the DCIM folder, and here is the clip we're going to be working with. I already have a folder ready for it, so we're just going to go ahead and drag and drop it in. And that's going to start copying over, and we'll be back as soon as that copies. And as soon as that is finished, we can go ahead and close our card. We don't need that anymore. Let's take a look at the file that came over. So the file that we have directly out of the GoPro is an MP4 file, and it's about 3 gigabytes in size, 1920 by 1080. Now, MP4 is the format that the GoPro encodes to internally, and it does a fantastic job of squeezing a ton of information into a relatively small container. But the problem is when you try and edit with the raw MP4 files directly from the GoPro, even in high-powered editors like Adobe Premiere and on pretty fast machines like I'm working on, it will actually choke up Adobe Premiere, and it has some trouble getting through the GoPro codec. So what you want to do is you want to convert this to a more friendly format. Now, a lot of people use GoPro Studio software to do that. And I will show you how to use that free software, but I tend to go a different route in order to make this more editing friendly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up a program called MPEG Stream Clip. This is a free program, and I'll include a link for you guys if you want to go ahead and check it out. So there's not much to this program. It's very simple. Here it is right here, a simple interface. And what I want to do is I want to go up to List, and I want to go to Batch List. So here I could put multiple files in here for processing at the same time. This time we're only working with a single file, but I'll do it the same way. So what I want to do is go ahead, take my clip, and drop it in. And right away, it's going to start prompting me. Choose a task. So we've got all sorts of different video formats. I'm going to want to export to QuickTime. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Select my destination folder. I'll stick with the same folder I am in, GoPro sample. There we go. And now it brings up all these complex settings. So what I like to do is first go in here, and there's tons and tons of choices. But what I like to work with is I like to work with Apple ProRes 422. This is a very, very robust codec. It's fantastic for editing. And what it's going to do is it's going to take all the information in the MP4 and it's just going to rewrap it into a QuickTime file using this ProRes codec. Now, it's not going to make the footage any better, but it definitely won't make it any worse. ProRes is going to make sure that you don't lose any of the information that was captured. So we're going to go ahead and select that right there. I'm going to set my quality up to 100%. Now you can choose any options here to scale the video to different sizes. I'm going to keep it at its 1920 by 1080 unscaled right there. No zooming, no cropping, none of this stuff is really needed. We don't need to alter the frame rate. Everything looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to the batch. And here is the process. And all you have to do is go ahead and click go. And it's going to start processing this right here, and we'll come back in just a minute as soon as it's done processing this 8-minute video clip. So there we go. The rendering is complete. It has gone ahead and converted and completed the job right here. So we can go ahead and look, and now we have two files in here. We have our original .mp4 file, and we now have a .mov file, which is in our Apple ProRes 422 codec. So like I said, all it did was took this MP4 wrapper and took everything out and expanded it and put it into an Apple ProRes 422 codec. Now, there is one disadvantage to using these professional editing codecs, and that is the size. As you can see, the GoPro footage originally was 2.99 gigabytes, but once it's unpacked and put into the ProRes, it's now 19.32 gigabytes. So if you are running on a system where space is an issue for you and you're worried about limited hard drive space, this may not be the best solution for you. So we can go ahead and we can close all of this out. Now, as I said, we also have the option of using GoPro Studio software that comes free with the GoPro to do a similar conversion, and let me show you how that works and give you a little bit of reasoning why I don't use it. So we have GoPro Studio here. You open up GoPro Studio and it has a simple interface where you import your files here and then you give it conversion tasks. So let's go ahead, let's take our original GoPro MP4, let's drop it in. There it is. It is in GoPro Studio, and it shows here it's 1920 by 1080. This one was shot at 59.94 or 60p because this one is going to be slowed down. I'm going to put it into slow motion. So what you do in GoPro Studio is you go ahead and you select the clip. It'll let you scrub through. You can see this is some aerial footage from our beach house down at the Outer Banks where I like to fly my quadcopter. And what you do is you go ahead into here, go into where I'd like to save the file. I'm going to save it to this same folder. We're going to put it in there. And I'm just going to do an underscore GPS for the file name for GoPro Studio. And then what you do is you go into advanced settings. Here it brings down a sort of simplified settings version. So you have your image size, you can change the resolution or you can keep it as the source. Frame rate, here you can let GoPro Studio do the frame rate conversion for you. I tend to like to keep everything as native as possible to how it was shot, and then do all of my changes in terms of frame rate and compression in the editor, Adobe Premiere. Just that way I know I have the best raw source material to work from in case something goes wrong at some point. So I'm actually going to leave that right there. And you have options to speed the footage up. You have quality settings right here. One feature that a lot of people like is that you can remove the fisheye effect from the footage using GoPro Studio. This is another thing that I like to use either After Effects or now Adobe Premiere Pro CC14 has presets to do the lens correction, so I like to leave that alone. So we go ahead, we click that, and we add the clip to the conversion list. So it's in here and it's waiting to be done. So let's go ahead and convert this here. And it'll begin converting. And let's come back in a second when this conversion is finished. Okay, so GoPro Studio has finished its conversion of the clip. It's finished right here. And if we look over here in our folder, we have the file right here. It's an MOV file, 18.35 gigabytes in size. Which is actually a little bit smaller than the 19.32 gigabytes that MPEG Streamclip did. So you may be asking me now, well, why don't I just use GoPro Studio then? It seems a little bit easier and it's made for GoPro. Well, the main reason I don't do it is because of this next part. If you look when you go to edit, look what has happened to the footage. When GoPro Studio takes in footage that you shot using ProTune, when it does its initial conversion, it automatically adds a sort of color correction to the footage for ProTune. So you can see everything's much more saturated and all that. Now, of course, you can go in and we can go down here and you can select none, which puts it back to the way it was before the color correction was applied. But the only problem is, in order to get it back to that nice flat image with the ProTune, is now you have to go in there and you have to go to export. And now you have to export a file, and you have choices for sizes and choices for your frame rate. But the problem is, you can see it's going to be compressing it again. So when I'm working with high-end footage and stuff that I really want to be able to color grade and get the best image out of, I don't want to be sitting there and uncompressing and recompressing it. So the best way to maintain that nice flat image is to skip GoPro Studio completely and use MPEG Streamclip. As you can see with this MOV, we still have that nice flat ProTune image. We don't have any saturation or any contrast added to it. So that's why I try and stay away from GoPro Studio. So now that we've gone through how to repackage your footage into a professional editing codec that'll be friendly with Adobe Premiere, here we are in Adobe Premiere CC 2014. And all we have to do is we can go over here, go to Import, and we're going to go ahead to our desktop and find our sample footage. This is the one created by the MPEG Streamclip. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring that in. And there we go. And now, like I said, this footage was shot at 5994 frames per second, which means 60p. So if we take a look at it, it's in regular real time, but it is at 60 frames per second. So in order to get the slow motion that I intended with this footage, we're going to go ahead and right click it. We're going to go to Modify, Interpret Footage, and right in here we're going to go to Assume this frame rate, and I'd like to slow this down to 23.976. There we go. And now, if we take a look at our footage, everything is in slow motion. So then all we have to do is we can go ahead, we can create a new sequence. I'll pick just a 24p 1080 sequence there. And I can go ahead and I can take this footage, drag and drop just the video because we don't need the humming of the Phantom in there. And here we go. We have nice slow motion footage. Now, the entire point of preserving the original file as best as possible and putting it into a professional codec like ProRes 422 is the fact that I now have all of the data in there and I don't have to worry about being able to manipulate it. So the first thing that I usually do is I will go through and I want to correct some of our lens distortion. So let me go ahead and find just a part of this clip. Here we go. We'll get the part of the clip where we're flying up and over the house. And as you can see, there's that natural lens distortion of the wide angle view of the GoPro lens. In Adobe CC 2014, you can go to Presets, Lens Distortion Removal, GoPro. I used a GoPro Hero 3 Black, and I shot this in 1080 wide. So I go ahead and grab that lens correction profile, drop it on, and there it goes. And it does a pretty good job straight out of the box, but if you do want to do some tweaking, you can go in and you can tweak the curvature and shift it until your horizon line looks about right. So that's an easy fix right there. And again, that's something if you try to go the GoPro Studio route, you can do that in GoPro Studio, but it's just as easy to add it here in Premiere. Now, since I preserved all of the color data and everything by using the ProRes 422 wrapper and codec, I now have a lot of room to play with this footage in terms of color correction. So I won't go too deep into color correction because there are a million ways you can color correct. You can give it a specific style, or you can try and get it closer to actual real life. You can make it cinematic, you can make it realistic, you can do pretty much whatever you want with this, but this gives you enough data that you can really push it pretty well before the image starts to fall apart. So just some of the basic ones that I'll put on this. The first thing that I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and add the brightness and contrast. ProTune, one of the first things it pulls out is it pulls out the contrast. So if we go to contrast and we begin to boost it, we can see, well, that's quite a bit. We can see that everything starts to pop a little bit more. The highlights get a bit lighter, the shadows get a bit darker. So there we go. We have a little bit more of a contrasty image, but now, of course, we still have a pretty desaturated image. So we can go ahead and we can go to the three-way color corrector tool, add that, and down here we have a slider for saturation. I won't go too deep into this again. I'm just going to do a simple one, but we can bump up our master saturation, and as we see, slowly our colors start to come back and start to pop out. So we can bring that back. And here we go. We'll push it to 200 and just super saturate it. So there's a much more vibrant image, and even if it looks like it might be a little too bright, we can drop down the overall brightness on everything. And there we go. And if you wanted to go deeper into creating a more custom image, you can go through and you can play with your colors in the three-way color corrector. You can, pull everything a little bit more towards orange or red, and shadows, midtones, highlights. And you have a lot of latitude in this image to play with it because we were able to preserve all of that data by using MPEG Streamclip to put it into ProRes. So it hasn't been expanded and then recompressed and then put back in here. So that's going to be about it, guys. I really hope this was helpful for you and shows you how you can, first of all, set up your camera to capture the flattest image you can with the widest dynamic range, and then how you can take that image and bring it into an editing suite like Adobe Premiere without compressing it and losing most of that data that you captured. And then you can add these effects one by one and really make your image pop. So you can take an image from this right here to this with really just some simple modifications and corrections.